The whistle of the train faded into the wind, leaving only dust and silence in its wake. Clara adjusted her shawl, her fingers clutching it tighter as if the fabric could shield her from the eyes that followed her every step into Timber Creek. She had imagined this moment differently, standing tall before her intended, receiving a nod of approval, perhaps even a smile. But now, as her boots pressed into the muddy street, the only greeting she found was the weight of stares, curious and unkind. A hand-lettered sign swayed in the breeze above the general store, its chipped paint the only splash of color in the gray day. Clara stepped inside, heart steady despite the ache in her chest. Behind the counter, a tall man turned. Jedediah Cole. The name she had read so many times in neat script. His eyes met hers, and for a brief, flickering second, hope stirred. But it died before it could settle. "You're Clara?" His voice carried through the room, drawing the attention of two men by the stove. "Yes," she said, lifting her chin. "Clara Whitmore." Jedediah's eyes moved over her, slow and hard. "You didn't mention you were." He paused, letting the sentence rot in the air. "This." The blood rushed to her face, but she didn't flinch. "I mentioned I'm strong. Hard-working." He snorted. "I asked for a wife, not a freight wagon." One of the men laughed, low and cruel. Clara stood, breath caught in her throat, but her hands didn't shake. She reached into her satchel, pulling out the last letter he sent. She held it out, but he didn't take it. "I crossed 2 states to get here," she said quietly. Jedediah turned away. "Then you can cross 2 more. I won't have you." Her heart thudded, a single, hollow beat. "And what am I to do?" "That's not my concern." The door swung behind her, colder now, the sky a shade darker. She walked, step after step, boots heavy with mud and pride. The street stretched empty before her, the mountains distant and still. Her fingers found the edge of her shawl again, pulling it tighter. She didn't cry. Not when the cold bit her cheeks. Not when her stomach growled. Not when she reached the edge of the town and the trees began to rise. Voices echoed through the pines, sharp cracks of axes meeting wood. She followed them, not knowing why, only that forward was better than back. The path climbed, rough and wild, until she saw them, men, chopping, hauling, sweat on brows and sleeves rolled high. None of them looked up, save one. He stood apart, taller than the rest, hands resting on the handle of his axe, eyes steady. He watched her, not with judgment, but curiosity, as if wondering why a woman alone would come this far. She stopped a few paces away. "I need work." The man tilted his head. "What can you do?" "Cook. Clean. Sew." She met his gaze, unyielding. "Whatever it takes." He looked past her, down the path, as if measuring the truth in her words. "You don't belong to any of them?" She shook her head. "I belong to no one." The man nodded once, slow. "Name's Elias." "Clara. You feed the men, keep the place decent, you'll have a bed in the bunkhouse and food same as the rest." She didn't thank him. Only nodded, just as slow. That night, the fire crackled, and the men ate. Clara sat by the stove, hands busy with thread and needle, mending a torn shirt. No one spoke much. Elias sat near, silent, carving a piece of wood into something shapeless. Now and then, he glanced her way, and she felt it, not judgment, but something else. Something steady. As the wind howled outside and the walls creaked with the cold, Clara closed her eyes. The bed was hard, the room rough, but the quiet was kind. And for the first time since stepping off that train, she let her chest rise and fall, slow, even. Tomorrow would come, and she would rise with it. Her journey hadn't ended in Timber Creek. It had only just begun. The morning frost bit through Clara's boots as she stood outside the bunkhouse, apron tight around her waist, sleeves rolled up. Smoke curled from the chimney, carrying the scent of strong coffee and yesterday's stew. The men were already moving, heavy boots thudding across the earth, axes slung over shoulders. None of them paid her much mind at first, just nods, grunts, and the occasional curious glance. They didn't know her anything. She was just another hand now, no different from the rest. Elias walked past, slower than the others, eyes scanning the clearing. He paused at the door, glancing at the pot hanging over the fire. You made that? She wiped her hands on a cloth. Best you'll get in these parts. A corner of his mouth twitched, not quite a smile, but something close. He ladled out a bowl, took a bite, and nodded. It'll do. By midday, the bunkhouse was quiet, empty save for Clara. She scrubbed the floor, hands red from the cold water. Outside, the rhythmic crash of axes rose and fell, a steady heartbeat in the woods. She didn't stop to rest. There was too much to do, and if she stopped, she might remember why she was here, what she left behind. Later, she hung shirts by the fire, the damp fabric heavy with sweat and pine. One of the younger loggers stepped inside, surprised to see her. He eyed the shirts, then her. Didn't think you'd last the night? She didn't look up. You thought wrong. He lingered, maybe waiting for more. When she gave him none, he left, the door shutting hard behind him. That night, the table was full again. Clara moved between them, pouring coffee, setting out bread, the stew pot scraped near empty. The men ate without fuss, but she caught their eyes now and then, brief flickers of something softer. Respect, maybe? Or just hunger satisfied. Elias sat at the far end, carving still. A long piece of wood, edges smoothed by careful hands. Clara watched him between tasks, the way he focused, patient. She poured him another cup. Why do you do that? She asked, nodding to the wood. Gives my hands something to do when I'm not swinging an axe. He looked up. Keeps the mind quiet. She nodded, sitting across from him, wiping her hands. Mine's never quiet. Elias set the carving down. What brought you here, Clara? She hesitated, then folded the cloth in her lap. A man wrote me letters. Promised a place, a future. Saw me for a minute, and that was enough for him to turn me out. Elias didn't speak, just studied her, as if weighing her words. I'm not here for pity, she said. Don't offer it. His voice was low, steady. The fire popped, and the wind rattled the shutters. Clara stood, gathering the empty bowls. I can do more than cook. Elias looked at her, eyes level. You already have. Days passed, and Clara's hands grew calloused. She hauled water, chopped vegetables, patched torn blankets. The men no longer stared like she didn't belong. They nodded in greeting, left her small tokens, a fresh apple, a strip of cloth, a piece of soap. Their way of saying she was one of them now. Elias spoke more, though never much. He showed her the trails beyond the camp, the creek where they drew water, the old tree marked with names long gone. She walked beside him, matching his pace, neither of them needing to fill the silence. You hold up better than most, he said once, handing her a bucket. I've had to, she replied. One evening, as snow threatened the hills, Clara sat by the fire, mending a coat. Elias watched her from the doorway, arms crossed. You staying? He asked. She didn't look up. You want me gone? No. A beat. Just wondering if you'll run like before. Clara set the coat aside, meeting his eyes. I didn't run. I walked. There's a difference. Elias nodded slowly, then stepped inside, shutting out the cold. Then stay. She didn't answer, but she didn't leave either. The next morning, the camp was quiet before dawn. Clara rose early, kneading dough, her breath visible in the chill air. Elias came in, took a seat near the stove, watching her work. You're built for this place, he said. You hold up. She glanced at him, a flicker of something warm passing between them. No more words needed. Just the sound of bread rising and the woods waking outside. The cold had settled deep into the bones of Timber Creek, the kind of cold that made breath hang like ghosts and turned earth to stone. Clara's hands were chapped, red from scrubbing, but they didn't falter as she kneaded dough on the rough wooden table. The camp stirred behind her, boots thudding, the door creaking open as men came and went, their talk brief, their laughter low. She didn't need to listen to know she'd become part of the rhythm, as steady as the swing of their axes. A plate clattered onto the table. Joe, the lanky one with a crooked grin, leaned in, his voice softer than she expected. "That stew yesterday damn near saved me." He rubbed his stomach, sheepish. "Never had better." Clara nodded, brushing flour from her cheek. "You'll have more tonight." He hesitated, as if waiting for her to say something more, then tipped his hat and left. The door banged shut behind him, leaving only the hiss of the stove and the creak of the floor beneath Elias' boots. He stood near the fire, sharpening a blade, eyes on the sparks that leapt with each pull. Clara didn't speak, just watched the light play across his face. He worked with care, never rushed, never loud. "They talk about you," he said after a while. "I'm sure they do. Not like before." Clara's hands paused over the dough. "Let them talk." Elias set the blade down. "They respect you." Her breath caught, but she kept her voice even. "They respect the food." He crossed the room, taking the seat across from her. The chair groaned under his weight. "That's where it starts." She looked up, the fire reflecting in her eyes. "What about you? What do you think?" Elias didn't answer right away. He reached for a strip of leather, began wrapping it around the handle of a tool. "I think you've done more than most thought you could. And you? I don't think like them." Silence stretched, not uncomfortable, just there. Clara went back to the dough, the weight of his words settling somewhere deep. Later, as the men returned, faces ruddy from the cold, Clara served them without fuss. They joked now, not cruel, just rough. One handed her a bundle of cloth, frayed at the edges. "Thought you might turn this into something useful." She took it, running her fingers over the fabric. "I'll see what I can do." Outside, snow began to fall, slow and heavy. Elias stood by the door watching, his axe resting against the frame. Clara joined him, arms crossed. "Winter's early," he muttered. She nodded. "Harder work ahead." He glanced at her, eyes steady. "You afraid of it?" "No." Her voice didn't waver. "Not anymore." Elias shifted, pulling his coat tighter. "You hold up." It wasn't a question. That night, the bunkhouse felt warmer, the men quieter, more tired. Clara sat by the fire, sewing patches into the cloth she'd been given. Elias was near, carving again, the shape starting to resemble something. A bird, maybe. "You always make animals?" she asked. "Sometimes." She waited, but he didn't explain. Instead, he held up the carving, rough but taking form. "For you." Clara took it, turning it in her hands. "Why?" "Because you stayed." She didn't speak, just nodded, placing the carving on the mantel above the fire. The days passed, marked by the snow thickening and the nights growing longer. Clara moved through them with purpose, the rhythm of the camp steady in her veins. She didn't think of Missouri, or of Jedediah, or the town that had once turned its back. This was her place now, and with every meal served, every shirt mended, she carved her own space into the bones of Timber Creek. One morning, as the sun barely touched the horizon, Clara found Elias outside, splitting logs, breath rising in clouds. "Firewood's running low," he said without looking up. "I'll help." He paused, then handed her a smaller axe. "You sure?" She took it, hands firm. "I said I can do more than cook." The first swing jarred her arms, the cold biting into her fingers, but she didn't stop. Elias watched, not with doubt, but with a quiet sort of pride. "You'll need gloves," he said. "Later." They worked side by side, the sound of splitting wood filling the still morning air. When they stopped, breathless, Elias handed her a cup of water. "You don't quit easy." Clara wiped her brow. "Not anymore." And as the light grew stronger, they stood there, not quite smiling, but close. The sound of hooves cut through the cold morning air, sharp and sudden. Clara glanced up from the pot she stirred, steam rising into her face, and saw the figure approaching through the snow-laden path. Jedediah Cole. His coat was fine, his horse finer. He didn't dismount, just sat tall, eyes scanning the camp like it was something he owned. Elias stepped out from the bunkhouse, wiping his hands on a rag. He met Jedediah's stare without blinking. The other men stood back, quiet, watching. "You've got something that don't belong here," Jedediah said, voice hard. Elias didn't move. "You're mistaken." Jedediah pointed, a gloved hand sweeping towards Clara. "Her. She's on my land. She's got no right." Clara's hands tightened around the ladle, but she said nothing. "She's earned her place," Elias said. "She was never meant to stay." Clara stepped forward, standing between them now, the heat of the fire still on her face. "I came here because you asked? I stayed because I was needed." Jedediah's mouth curled. "I didn't ask for you to squat on my land taking handouts." "No handouts." Elias' voice cut clean. "She works. She pulls her weight. More than you know." Jedediah's eyes narrowed. "This isn't about work. It's about respect. You let her stay, you lose it. I'm not the one who's lost it," Elias said, stepping closer. The tension sat thick between them. Jedediah's hand twitched near his belt, but he didn't reach for anything. Instead, he turned his horse, spitting into the snow. "This isn't done." As he rode off, Clara felt the stares again, not mocking now, but waiting. She turned back to the fire, stirred the pot, and said nothing. Later, inside, Elias leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. "He won't let this go. I'm not leaving." Clara's voice was steady. "You don't have to." She looked up. "Then what do we do?" Elias pushed off the frame, walked to the table, and Saturday. "We keep working. We don't stop for him." The days that followed were tight, colder somehow. The men spoke less, eyes flicking to the path where Jedediah had come, wondering when he'd return. Clara worked harder, shoulders tense, breath short, but she didn't falter. One evening, as the sun dipped low, Elias found her by the woodpile, axe in hand, splitting logs with a rhythm that matched the beat of her heart. "You don't need to prove anything," he said. She didn't stop. "I'm not proving. I'm living." He stepped closer, took the axe from her gently. "You're not alone here." Clara looked at him, the weight of the past weeks heavy in her chest. "It feels like I am." Elias shook his head. "Not to me." That night, she sat by the fire, the warmth barely touching the cold in her bones. Elias carved again, slower now, the shape more defined. A bird, wings spread. "You'll have to face him," he said quietly. "I know." "You afraid?" She didn't answer right away. "Not of him." Elias set the carving down. "Then we'll stand together." Clara's eyes found his, and for the first time, she let the fear slip. Just a little. She reached for the carving, fingers tracing the wings. "Thank you?" "For what?" "For seeing me." Elias didn't smile, but the way he looked at her was warmer than the fire. The next morning, Clara woke before the others. She stood outside, the snow crunching beneath her boots, and looked toward Timber Creek. The town that once sent her away. The place where she'd been measured and found wanting. She wasn't the same woman who had walked those streets before. Behind her, the camp stirred, life moving on. But ahead, there was something unfinished. She turned back, eyes meeting Elias as he stepped outside. He nodded, as if reading her thoughts. "When?" "Soon." She didn't need more than that. The sky hung low over Timber Creek, heavy with clouds. As Clara walked the path she thought she'd never take again. Each step sank into the half-melted snow, the sound muffled, but her heart beat loud enough to fill the silence. Her coat was plain, her boots worn, but her back stayed straight. She didn't glance back. She didn't need to. Elias followed, a few paces behind, not as a guard, not as a guide, but just there, steady like always. The town came into view, unchanged, weathered and gray. A few heads turned as she passed the first building, eyes squinting from windows, whispers already curling through the air like wood smoke. She didn't hurry. The store stood just ahead, the signs swinging in the wind, and she reached for the door before the nerves could rise. Inside, warmth clashed with cold, the fire roaring in the corner stove. Jedediah stood by the counter, talking low with a man Clara didn't know. His voice cut off when he saw her, his jaw tightening. You come back for more pity? He asked, loud enough for the room to hear. Clara walked forward, the floorboards creaking beneath her. I didn't come for anything from you. You've got nerve, I'll give you that. I came to make things clear. Her voice was calm, but firm. I'm not on your land. I'm not in your debt. I've worked for what I have. Jedediah scoffed, stepping forward. Worked? You play house with those woodsmen, and you think that makes you something? I don't need to think it. I know it. Elias stepped inside, closing the door behind him with a quiet thud. His presence filled the room, solid as the mountains. Jedediah glanced at him, but didn't speak. Clara took another step. You turned me away because of what you saw. But you don't see me. Not really. I saw enough. You saw what you wanted to see. You thought I'd crawl away, like I had no place without you. The man by the counter shifted, looking between them. Jedediah's face darkened, but Clara didn't stop. I stayed because I made a place. Because I'm worth more than your judgment. You've got no claim. I don't need one. Her voice was steady now. I'm not asking for permission. Jedediah opened his mouth, but no words came. The weight of the room settled on him, heavy, unmoving. Clara turned to leave, but paused. I didn't come west to be chosen. I came west to choose. Outside, the wind cut sharp, but the cold didn't bite the same. Elias walked beside her, hands tucked into his coat, saying nothing. You think he'll leave it? She asked. He won't forget, Elias said. But he won't come back either. Clara nodded, eyes on the horizon. Good. They reached the edge of town, the trees bending under the weight of snow, the road winding back to the camp. She looked back once, the town already fading behind them. Elias glanced her way. You did right. I did what I had to. That's all there is. They walked on, boots pressing new prints into the old path, side by side, without need for more words. The cabin stood half-built, its frame rough against the gray sky, beams darkened by morning frost. Clara stood at the edge of it, a hammer in hand, sleeves rolled past her elbows. Her breath fogged in the cold, but she didn't mind. The wood felt good beneath her hands, solid, real. The smell of sawdust hung in the air, sharp and clean. Elias lifted a plank onto the frame, his movements sure, practiced. We'll need more nails. Clara reached into the box, passing them over without a word. She watched him work, the way he fit each piece into place without rushing. The quiet between them wasn't heavy. It was the kind that came after storms, when things finally settle. Didn't think I'd be building anything out here, she said, half to herself. Elias glanced down, setting his hammer aside. Most folks don't come west to build what they planned. She smiled faintly. No, I suppose not. The wind picked up, rustling the bare branches, but the walls of the new cabin stood firm. Elias stepped back, wiping his hands on his trousers, looking over the progress. Clara followed his gaze, seeing more than wood and nails, seeing something that would last. You sure about this? He asked, eyes not leaving the frame. I'm here, aren't I? That ain't the same. She looked at him then, really looked. I chose to stay. Not because I had to. Not because I was turned away somewhere else. I stayed because this feels more like home than any place I've known. Elias nodded, slow, thoughtful. Then we'll finish it. Later, Clara knelt in the dirt, smoothing out a patch of ground near the side of the cabin. She'd cleared it herself, hands raw from pulling roots, but it was ready. A small garden, come spring. Something to grow with her. She heard footsteps and didn't turn until Elias crouched beside her, placing a small sack of seeds into her hand. Early, but you'll be ready, he said. She took them, fingers closing around the rough cloth. Always am. They sat like that for a while, the camp quiet, the trees standing guard. The men worked in the distance, but it felt like another world. Elias spoke low. You think about what's next? Clara rested her hands on her knees, eyes on the soil. Tomorrow's enough. He nodded again, standing, offering her his hand. She took it, let him pull her up. They stood side by side, looking out over the land, the mountains still capped in white, but the promise of change in the air. As the sun broke through the clouds, just a sliver of gold, Clara felt the warmth settle on her face. She didn't say anything, didn't need to. She was here, with him, and that was all that mattered. They walked back to the cabin, boots crunching over frost-hardened ground, shoulders brushing. No grand words, no declarations. Just the quiet certainty of two people who had found something worth holding on to. At the door, Elias paused, looking down at her. "You hold up," he said. She smiled, soft but sure. "We both do." And with that, they stepped inside, the future theirs to build, one day at a time.